In the last lecture module, we saw those beautiful pictures of the mathematicians and the logical empiricists come shattering to the ground. In this module, we want to see what Quine makes of the shards that lay at his feet. We'll see what Quine's naturalistic alternative to the rational reconstruction project turns out to be. What we'll see is that Quine recognizes that the promise of certainty, of somehow injecting justification into our belief system in a way that makes no presuppositions about the nature of the world, is an illusion. But it's an illusion that both the epistemologist and the skeptic share. And in recognizing that illusion, Quine thinks that he's found his solution to the skeptical dilemma. But if we can't get away with doing epistemology absent any presuppositions about the nature of the world, if all of our epistemic musings presuppose a theory about ourselves, about the world, and about the way we interact with the world, then what we ought to do is to try and minimize the assumptions that we make when we're doing our epistemic work, and try to make assumptions that are based on the best methodologies, the best theories we have available to us. And so Quine thinks that we should use science, use biology, use psychology, use anthropology, and so on, to look at ourselves. As an engineer would look at the blueprints of a machine to see where we seem to work well, where we seem to work poorly, if there are places where our functioning can be improved, and the sorts of conditions in which we're operating. Now, this means that there's a certain circularity in the methodology. Epistemology is contained within science, because science now informs our understanding of the nature of our minds, the nature of the world, and the nature of their interaction with one another. And yet, within epistemology, we also contain science, because the epistemology we develop will explain how to best go about doing science, why it is that science works as well as it does, and so on. And so Quine says this might raise concerns that this is some sort of vicious circularity. But he says, no, it's not, because it's a consciously recognized mutual containment. We don't assume something merely for the sake of proving it. We assume it, we keep those assumptions in mind even as we interact with the world, and we're always open to questioning those assumptions. But we need to make assumptions. It's a forced choice. Let's begin. So Quine thinks that if the grand foundationalist project of defining all of our object terms in the observational language and providing all of our object laws on the basis of immediate experience, if that project is a failure, then we cannot offer a validation of science external to science. Translated into the context of this course, Quine seems to be saying, if we cannot find a means of injecting justification into our knowledge edifice, so that inferential transfer of justification can carry it through the rest, then we cannot create a knowledge edifice that is immune from skeptical challenge. That's why I think it's so important to ask why Quine starts the paper with this analogy between axiomatization in mathematics and logical positivism. And specifically, I think Quine has come to realize that both of these projects have failed. While he doesn't emphasize the connection here, it's well known in logic and mathematics long before 1969. The Gödel's theorem shows that no such theoretically rich axiomatized system is possible. It seems reasonable to suppose that Quine believes the projects fail for the same reasons and tries to make those reasons explicit. I think that Quine has come to realize that these projects have failed precisely because of the limitations of their methodology and its epistemic ground, certainty. He doesn't reject certainty completely. Rather, he realizes that science, conceived as general rational inquiry, cannot rely upon certainty alone in its ambitious project to know the nature and operations of the world. Of greater importance, I think, Quine follows Carnap in realizing that ontological and metaphysical neutrality promised by certainty is likewise an illusion. No inquiry can begin from the total absence of ontological commitment, nor can any skeptical challenge to the products of such inquiries. Understanding the nature of knowledge requires that one have some commitments regarding the mind, the world, and the sorts of interactions into which the world and the mind are capable of entering. There is no epistemology without ontology. Importantly, the skeptical arguments likewise have ontological commitments. In weighing the relevance of skeptical arguments, one must choose between the commitments each makes. And it is here that the skeptic has beguiled us with the seeming ontological neutrality of certainty. Once we are freed of the illusion that certainty gives us an external and ontologically neutral ground to select ontologies, we see that we must make a forced choice between candidate ontologies. Thus we must choose between, for instance, the evil demon hypothesis and the external world hypothesis. So far we see that the external world hypothesis is preferable on every ground, and as a result, we need not countenance the skeptic's arguments. This point may be subtle, but it reconfigures the debate. It helps us to recognize the real nature of the skeptical challenge. If we follow the skeptic and suppose, as they would like us to, that their challenge to our belief system must be utterly and completely refuted in order for us to go on believing what we believe, then the skeptic has the upper hand. But this isn't the actual nature of the skeptic's challenge. Let's end this module here, and we'll pick up this idea and explore it further in the next lecture module.